everyone, my name is Corey. I am a programming librarian at the Broomfield Library, and I'm also in charge of the Teen Art Club. This month, in place of a typical in-person or online meeting, I'm going ahead and just posting a sort of tutorial video for you. You can follow along, you can access it anytime, and you can even have watch parties if you want and kind of have your own sort of art club just for this month of September. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. Today we're going to be working with black paper and pastel pencils or charcoal pencils. A white charcoal pencil works as well too, so let's get into it. So here's just a list of materials you'll need: black drawing paper and a graphite pencil, ideally 4H because it's a much harder graphite and it will draw very lightly, but you could use a regular number 2 pencil and just make sure you draw really lightly. Kneaded eraser is great. Another eraser would work fine, but kneaded erasers will prevent smudges on the black paper if you need to erase a mistake with the graphite, which you'll use for your base drawing. And then a white charcoal or pastel pencil for the finished drawing. And the black charcoal or pastel pencil is optional, but if you do want to have some areas that are even darker than the black of the paper to really create some contrast, you can use that. And a pencil sharpener is ideal too. Just a regular handheld one should do fine. The black drawing paper and the white pastel pencil you can get from the library. So if you're interested in trying this project, just go onto the library and say you're interested, and we can give you those two materials. So I found this image on Unsplash, and unsplash.com has really, really great photos that are copyright free by some wonderful artists. This image really struck me as perfect for the white on black because it already has so many darks. It would be really easy to just draw this, and the link for it was up above. So here we go. I'm using Strathmore Art Again black paper 400 series. And again, you can grab that from the library. I have a 4H pencil there in my little extender because the pencil itself is super tiny right now. And then that gray thing is the kneaded eraser. So right now I'm looking at my computer screen because I have the reference image up on my computer screen and I'm using that to create the drawing. And I know it's really, really light and kind of hard to tell, so I apologize. Once I start using the pastel pencil, you're going to see it much more easily. But you can kind of see how light my outlines are. I'm really not drawing very hard, even though I'm using a lighter pencil. And I'm just kind of very lightly sketching in the main components of the cat's face. So I'm working on the right eye right now. There's the pupil. And it's really important with a white on black paper drawing that you maintain those dark areas. So very lightly outline them. And if you do make a mistake, try and completely erase it so you can get back to the full black of the paper. But you do want to try and be very intentional. It's definitely working opposite from what we're typically used to, having to shade in all the dark areas and keep the light areas. This time we are filling in the lightest lights and the lighter areas and maintaining that dark of the paper, so that black paper is really going to do a ton of the work for you with the shadowing. And right now you can see I'm using my pencil, and sorry, my hand went out of the frame, but I'm holding up my pencil to the drawing to get an idea of dimension and proportion. So I figured out that the width of one eye is from the edge of the right eye, the outer edge of the right eye, to the outer edge of the left eye. It's 3 lengths of the width of the right eye. And I know that sounds really convoluted, but when I took my pencil and sort of measured how wide that right eye is and then went to the left, that helped me know where the edge of the left eye would need to be. So, and I'm doing that again. I'm kind of just giving approximate measurement. And there you see my arm. Sorry, my hand went out of the screen. But I figured out again that the width of the right eye from the inner corner of that right eye, it's the width of the right eye down from that to get the top of the nose. So again, that's just helping me block in and be proportionate with where the features of the cat's face are. And thankfully, this is a pretty minimal image as far as just a few, the really bright highlights in the eye and then some of the fur and the whiskers. So I'm just very lightly blocking in, and I just thought this image went so well for this topic because there is so much black and I'm not having to draw a lot. And you can follow along, and I linked the image at the beginning so you can access it too. If you want to print it out, that's great, or you can, if you have access to a computer screen, you can also just look at it on a computer screen. There I just used my kneaded eraser, and the great thing about a kneaded eraser is that it just lifts the graphite off really easily without really smudging, so that helps for that. Now I'm going to get into the pastel pencil. I have two different kinds. I have a Conte à Paris. Don't know if I'm saying that right, but it sounds sophisticated, I guess. And then I also have a Faber-Castell, which is the one I'm using right now. It's really tiny and short, but it works nicely. It's a little thinner than the other one. But I'm just going in, blocking in those light areas, and again, maintaining those darks. And the speed I have of this video, it's at 1.5 times. So I sped it up just a little bit from 100% to 150% because otherwise this video might run kind of long. But I just wanted it to be still at a pace where you'd be able to follow along, but not quite real time. And a lot of this I'm just very lightly on those lighter parts, those darker parts where there's not as much need for the white pencil. I'm almost just barely hovering over the paper and just very lightly laying down a little bit of color. And then of course with those really white highlights, I am going in as dark as I possibly can, trying to really fill it in. Just create that contrast. And ideally, the pastel pencil is pretty sharp. I didn't get it quite as sharp as I would have liked. It's so crucial to work with as sharp of a pencil as you can, because especially for those finer detail pieces, you can really make sure that you're not encroaching on the areas that you need to remain dark. So remember to keep your pencil as sharp as possible. You might need to stop and sharpen it every once in a while, and that is totally okay. Again, right here, I'm just barely hovering over the paper surface just because it's a lot easier to add layers on to get the white lighter rather than accidentally getting too much white and then having to try and lift some off later to get it back to a darker shade. Really trying to create the glassiness of the eye with that really bright highlight, and then also some of the sort of lines that appear in the iris. And then just working at your own pace. It's totally fine to take as much time as you need. After many years of practice, sometimes you'll get a little quicker, but don't ever feel like you need to rush, especially if it's something that you're not enjoying because you have to go so fast. Just take your time, sometimes working in chunks. If you feel like you can do just one eye in one sitting session, that's perfect. Go ahead, get up, take a walk, or grab a snack, and then come back to it and continue working. So there's nothing wrong with approaching a piece in small chunks. And this one is actually really a lot of fun. I have not worked with white on black paper in a very long time. My background, I'm a librarian at the Broomfield Library, as I said at the beginning, but I also have a background in art. As an undergraduate, I double majored in studio art with an emphasis in drawing and painting and art history. So I've worked with many different kinds of mediums. My medium of choice right now is a watercolor, but this was a lot of fun, and I think I will continue to experiment with the white on black paper in the near future, and I hope you will too. I hope this kind of gets you interested in maybe sort of getting your brain to think in a slightly different way than we're used to, where instead of having to shade everything in with a typical graphite pencil or marker or whatever medium you prefer, you're literally just getting the light parts and the highlights. This was a little bit of a challenge because that left side of the nose was super dark but not fully black. And right there you can see there's a couple times where I use my bare finger to kind of smudge things a little bit or lighten it up. And ideally you don't want to actually use your finger. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of a no-no right there because the oils from your skin can really affect the paper and the pastel on there. So later on I use a tissue to blot up some of the white and help with blending. So ideally just using a tissue and not your skin. And the pencil is really great, especially when it's really sharp. So again, I can't stress the importance of having a sharpened pencil. When you have a fine point, it already creates those kind of almost individual hairs, the texture of the fur. So if you just go in little streaks and strokes, you already get a fur-like effect. So that's what I'm doing here, just kind of starting to fill in some of that fur in there. Very light lines. Nowhere near as dramatic as that lightest part in the eye. And also with working on a piece itself, sometimes you'll kind of think, oh, I'm kind of done with this part. You'll start moving to a different part of the drawing. And then maybe as you continue to work and fill in more, you realize, oh, I need to fill this in a little more. So sometimes as you start filling in details, the other parts of the drawing, you'll realize you might need to fill in a little more, or maybe you did get it a little too light, and then you can use your kneaded eraser. You don't want to rub the kneaded eraser across that with the pastel. What you can do is get really mold it so that it's into a fine sort of shape, only the size of the area that you want to sort of blot up the white, and then just gently kind of press and then lift off. Again, you don't want to like rub it on the paper, you just want to kind of press and lift off. And the other thing that helps too is tissue, and just a tissue, and that will kind of help you either to blend and soften edges, or if you just kind of gently lay it on there, kind of dab and then lift it. So I am working on the other eye now, and I keep saying left eye. Technically it's the cat's right eye, but it's on our left, so I'm not being technically correct here, but I'm working on the left eye. And this one, because it's so in the shadow, it's more of a cast light. So you see on that outer left corner that it's pretty light, and then as it moves closer towards the center, because it's in so much shadow, you're really not seeing much detail, just the barest highlights, and you can almost make the outline of the pupil. And again, filling in that fur. You might notice that I have almost a tendency for hopping around in different parts of my drawings, and that's just how I work. Some people might be different. They might work completely on one area of a drawing and get it fully finished and then move to a different part and continue that. I personally work kind of just jumping from spot to spot, trying to build up the whole drawing at the same time, and whatever works best for you is the way to go. So don't feel like you have to stick to any one way. It's your drawing and your chance to do it the way you like and the way you enjoy. I also really like with the white pastel on black paper how quickly a drawing can go compared to a full graphite drawing. With the graphite, you have to build up many, many layers almost all over every part of the surface, because you have to fill in the shadows completely. And then other than your lightest highlights, you have to have graphite in almost every spot. So it takes a lot longer to build up those layers and then just maintain those. There's only a few areas generally that are going to have a super light, versus this, where, especially with such a dramatic photo or reference image that has so much dark, this can go pretty quickly. So I would maybe, even if you're a beginner, feel free to try this out. And if you feel like other drawings just take too long and you want to maybe kind of do something a little quickly, this can be a great way to kick something out a little more quickly. And it's, I think, a lot of fun. Getting in some of those whiskers there. And just remembering too, sometimes if you're struggling with kind of the initial drawing, basic shapes, just trying to break down the image itself to basic shapes. So like the eyes are ultimately kind of a spherical shape, although not exactly. They kind of have the almond sort of oblong orientation. But still, ultimately, when you think of a sphere, there's going to be kind of the shadow and then the cast light at the bottom, which is exactly what's happening on that left eye. Same with the right eye, there's just more of a strong light shining over all of it. So, and then the nose is kind of an upside down triangle with a bit of kind of spherical shapes to either side, and then the sort of bottom part of the nose is almost like a cylinder. So you have that lightest light, there's a groove in the center because of the shape of the cat's nose, and then getting darker as you go towards the left. Just filling in some of those really barely there furs and highlights on the left side of the face, or the cat's right side. Here I'm starting to get a little bit into the ears, and the ears have pretty long hairs that extend out, but they're not as pronounced as the whiskers. So again, kind of trying to make it look a little more full. And just by very lightly kind of shading and then having the individual lines over some of the shading, you just get a nice fur effect. Again, I'm using my finger and I shouldn't be. Sorry. Not leading by example. Again, I noticed here that I start out fairly conservatively as far as the light, especially in those shaded areas of laying down the white. And then if I realize, oh yeah, that could get a little lighter, have more white, then I can go back over, versus starting out too dark and then having to try and lift some off. And so much about, it depends on any kind of art really, but I have found that with sort of more realistic drawing, layers is a huge part. Also with painting too, specifically watercolor painting. If you're ever curious about trying out watercolor painting, a lot of it involves layers and layers and layers, and a little bit of patience, actually a lot of patience. But in this case, again, if you're feeling a little impatient and maybe wanting something to go a little quicker, I think the white on black can really help with that. Starting to get the ear on the left side a little bit. So just giving yourself the time to kind of go through and look at each sort of area, building it up, adding layers back in if you need to, using the proper material, unlike I'm doing, use a tissue to lighten things up. And there I really had the bulk of the drawing. Sorry, there was a little transition there. I went to grab a tissue. So here I'm doing it correctly. Just some of those edges where the whiskers almost kind of fade off into the shadows. I'm just, again, laying it down, blotting it up to just try and lighten the edges. Now I am using the Conte Paris pencil here. It's a little bit thicker. So again, not at this point, unless I could get it sharper. I just don't have a pencil sharpener quite wide enough for that one. It's a little bit of a wider pencil itself, the actual body of it. So not ideal for those super fine details. Oops, sorry, you see my face in the corner there. But just kind of filling in some of those wider whites. It's a really high quality pastel pencil, this one is. So I just kind of wanted to sort of smooth some things in there and just add some of those highlights. And I keep saying pastel pencil, but I think if you use a white charcoal pencil, that would work fine as well. Here again, I'm just kind of almost smoothing in some layers. It's not as much of the fine lines, although there's a little bit of that happening, but kind of smoothing some things out a little bit with this larger pencil. And again, if you don't have a white pastel pencil or charcoal pencil, we will have some at the library that you could pick up a sheet of black paper and a white pastel pencil, so you can at least, because many people probably don't have those just laying around or on hand, so you can have access to that. Filling in a few more details. And the paper is great because it is nice and dark. However, I did find that I kind of stood back for a moment there to kind of look at things. Sometimes that's a good recommendation, like if you're feeling you're kind of right on top of it and feeling a little tired of it. Sometimes just getting up or walking a distance away and looking at it from further away can help you identify maybe trouble areas or things that you might need to adjust or change or add. So sometimes I'll try and do that as well. And you keep seeing my nose and glasses peek in the lower bottom corner of the screen. I apologize for that. Filling in some of those last few details. But you see, as I was saying before, on the left side of the screen there is a black pastel pencil, and I'm going to use in a moment, because I thought to make a little bit more contrast, filling that in might help make it pop a little bit, and it did, because it was ultimately a bit darker than the black paper, but you don't need a black pencil to do that. I just kind of last minute decided to do that, and I just happen to have a decent amount of materials laying around, but for this, really all you need is the black paper and the white pencil and a graphite pencil if you want to lay down a base drawing like I did at the beginning. But you can kind of tell how that is helping it pop a bit. I'm not being like super careful here because I just kind of want the basics and the darks shaded. And then I do eventually, although I don't think it shows in this video, after I stopped filming, I quickly took a tissue and blended things out, the black, a little bit, so it wouldn't be quite as standing out as stark as it is on the black paper, because it's kind of subtle, but it definitely under light you could see that black just kind of sticking out compared to the rest of the black paper. And just filling in those really nice dark shadows to help add contrast. Contrast is always great. It's gonna really make a piece stand out. There you go. I do a little bit while I'm actually drawing, but I think later on, after I kind of finished the video, I did sort of blend things out even more. I think we're approaching the end here, so I hope you've enjoyed this, and you could always go back and rewatch it again. This video is going to be online, so you can watch it as many times as you like, or pause it to rewatch and go back. Oh yes, I forgot to mention, so if you do have a black pastel pencil and maybe you went a little too light with your white pencil, you can very lightly go over and blend that out a bit, which I did decide to do. Again, it's not necessary to have the black pencil. See, even then I kind of go back and forth and back and forth. And so you can kind of get to a point where if you keep working it, you can overwork it. So I always have to restrain myself when I get to that point and just sometimes say, okay, it's done. Kind of highlighting some of those sort of lines in the iris again. Filling in a little more white, getting some of those shadows in between. And there, I think, oh, no, one more. Okay, yeah, I did want to get a little bit lighter on that eye and then add a signature. You don't have to add a signature, but if you want to, go ahead and put one on your piece. And there we go. And that is the finished product. And you'll see it on screen here. There, I went ahead and took a photo of it so you get a closer up view. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and happy art making.